Greetings everyone and welcome back to LNER Railways with me, Elizabeth. Today we are going to look at the LNER class Ravens Q6 Steam Locomotive, and that is locomotive number 3418. So thank you for joining me again, and let's jump into it. So let's have a look at the loco on the round table and the box of the locomotive in the background. A great illustration of the locomotive here by Hornby, and definitely a beautiful livery in the LNER class. And obviously here we can see the famous wheel arrangement, which is 080 wheel arrangement in double O gauge. So we have a semi-shiny black livery color, and obviously bear in mind this is all very plastic, and this is how the locomotive was built. Even the running plates are plastic. And let's have a look at the side of the box description here. That is loco 24 LNER Class Q6 locomotive. And as usual we have the instruction pamphlet with Hornby with instructions how to service the locomotive, and then obviously I found the little accessory packet in it. It's very little extras in it, but yes, it also contains the coupler for the front of the locomotive, so if you need to put that on, I guess you can fit that on if you need the coupler in front. But now having a look at the locomotive, and I think overall it's a beautiful finish. And looking at the box here, obviously it's a safety sleeve box, and obviously protects the locomotive, and I'm quite impressed with the loco's weight. It's quite light for a newly developed locomotive. I mean, this locomotive is not that old, but yeah, was worried that it might not pull the coaches or even the freight around the track, but yes, I have limited it to 16 wagons, freight wagons and coal wagons, and then up to about 18 or 20 coaches, and it performs well on a straight. And obviously looking at the box, it's DCC ready, and the illustrations on the box is normal and the history, and obviously the description, it's a 6F locomotive. This era 3 locomotive, and obviously it is a Ravens Q6, and it has a 5-pole motor and flywheel, and obviously 6F done later on by British Railways. So now looking at the front of the locomotive, we can see clearly the buffer beam, and it has sprung buffers, and on the side it's also got great finishes, and obviously the famous wheels and the wheel style that it's done, and the rear also featuring some lampons, 3 of them and 1 on top, and then obviously the cull finish and the streamline effect of the tender, but we'll get into that just now. And so overall, a lovely little logo to go on a layout, as you can see on my round table with my transport trucks. But let's have a look. So it's got sprung buffers, and the beam, red beam, is obviously painted with a locomotive number, and then obviously the firebox finish with simply applied handrails on the top, and at the boiler the smoke box doors are all the darts even black and riveted, so it really gets covered with a black color, so you really can't see it unless you really zoom in, but it's still a very nice logo to have on the layouts. So it also features 3 lampons along with a hook and the loco number on the beam, as I previously stated. So it's got metal sprung buffers, also previously stated, and in plain black livery. So overall, the proportions of the Q6 is captured nicely, and even the tender with its streamlined cull and ground finishes. And the cylinder finishes all well done, and on the side of the cab the number is also nicely printed, not in 3D but still quite acceptable numbering and lettering on the tender done there. So if you zoom in there, the numbering of the cab is quite visual, and then also on the toolbox is the logo stamp on that one. And then obviously we're featuring glazed windows and some great cab finishes, and also the cull load. And once again, looking at the tender, it's actually quite a remarkable nice tender, and again the buffer beams at the back and the sprung buffers, and the streamline effect really finishes off the tender nicely in overall. So here we're looking at the LNER in character on the layout, and quite amazing indeed. And again, obviously emphasizing that this locomotive was never intended for passenger services, but for heavy freight services. Now, the steps and all finishes were nicely done, and the plate display on the toolbox once again was also a nice finish for the locomotive, but again, a person would expect some die cast finishes on this loco, but the whistles and everything was nicely done. It has got obviously plastic feel to the locomotive, but I think that's what actually gives it the nice black color. So obviously now nice moldings on the tenders, and the lampons, and the 3 at the bottom there. And obviously this locomotive boasts the famous northeastern chimney, and again the Northeastern Railways Class 72, classified as a Class Q6 by the LNER, designed for heavy freight. Alright everyone, now we're going into the history of this LNER Q6, and at the end of the first decade of the 20th century, the upsurge in the growth of mineral traffic in the northeast exceeded the amount of steam haulage available to transport it. The existing northeastern Q5 locomotives, designed by William Horsdale, were extremely capable engines, but the new Chief Mechanical Officer, Vincent Raven, felt a more powerful, superheated design would be justified in these circumstances. Thus the name Raven LNER Q6 locomotive. Between February 1913 and March 1921, 120 examples of Raven's new T2 8-coupled locomotives were built in 6 batches, resulting in a powerful, sturdy, and reliable engine that the design that fulfilled its requirement to haul mineral, heavy freight traffic right through to the late 1967. The first 70 were built at Darlington, with the last batch of 50 being constructed by Armstrong, Whitworth and Company of Newcastle. The class was not intended for passenger traffic services and was therefore purely equipped with steam braking for both engine and tender, 5 different types of which were used with the locomotive, which ranged from the early 3940 gallon tenders to the later 4125 self-trimming type. When the NER was absorbed into LNER at grouping in 1923, the locomotive class was designed as Q6 and they operated from sheds across the northeast of the territory, from Hornby to Tyneside and across Northumberland into Cumbria, even making it into Scotland during 1923. Although the class remained visually similar during its lifetime, subtle differences arose when the boilers were updated, starting between 1927 and 1929, identified by the boiler dome being placed just over a foot further backwards to the cab, with a flatter aspect. In due course, all the engines were fitted with these new diagram 50A boilers. Other detail differences were evolutionary rather than revolutionary, with items such as the smokebox doors, chimneys and buffers changing from whilst the introduction of the positive drive LED to changes in the position of the lubricators. At nationalisation in 1948, all 120 engines were taken on by British Rail, their numbers being placed in the 60 XXX range, and the process was completed by June 1951. The first withdrawal from service came in May 1960, and this only arose due to an accident. It was December 1961 before the next occurred, and it wasn't until April 1963 that withdrawal started in earnest. A single Q6 has been preserved, saved by North Eastern Locomotive Preservation Group and housed at the North York Moors Railway, which is locomotive number 2238. Locomotive number 3418 was the ninth of the Armstrong Whitworth locomotives to be built, entering traffic in February 1920 as NER 2261 and receiving the 50A boiler on November 14, 1940. This is the locomotive that we have today, is locomotive 3418. Initially allocated to Bladen Shed, The locomotive moved to Borough Gardens on January 27, 1927, moving to the Dairy Coats in April 1939. The war years saw it moving around, spending spells at York and Neville Hill before settling at Consett in June 1943. At the beginning of May 1962, now numbered 63418, the engine moved to Sunderland from where it was withdrawn and sent for scrapping at Darlington on August 6, 1963. It is so sad, another locomotive scrapped, but this is the path that all the locomotives had to follow leading up to mid-1960s and late 1960s, and unfortunately only a few did survive. Thank you very much everyone once again for joining me on the history of the LNER Q6 Raven Q6 locomotive number 3418. Thank you once again for all your comments and your likes and your subscribes. I really do appreciate it, and it does help to build the channel. Thank you once again from the bottom of my heart, and wishing you all the best, and catch you again later. Take care. Regards, Elizabeth.